today we're looking at box and whisker plots and what they mean and how to read them. In other words, interpret. So I have a box and whisker plot here, and I have the data that it represents up here. So we have how many texts students send in a week, and I've got 22 numbers in my list, and this is my box and whisker plot. So let's talk about where this box and whisker plot comes from and what it means about these students and their texts. So first of all, we have 22 numbers, and that means I have an even number of numbers. So that means that the middle is going to be between two numbers, and in this case it's between these 35s. So if I were to put a line here in between my 35s, I have 11 numbers under it and 11 numbers below it. So that cuts it in half. So that is my median, which is this right here. That's my median. So that means 11 of the numbers are below here and 11 of the numbers are above here. So you might want to ask yourself, why is this side longer than this side? And the answer to that simply is that the numbers above 35 are much more spread out. I mean, we go all the way up to 120 as opposed to the other side where it only goes down to 8. So that's why this side is longer. It's not because there are more numbers there, it's because of how they are spread out. And so your box and whisker has to line up with a number line that is evenly spaced. And notice how my number line is a true number line with intervals and is not just my data written below my number line. You don't write all the data numbers in a box and whisker. The only ones you do write are the ones that I'm going to highlight. So we have said that this middle one, this is my median. Now in this case, they show you the numbers here, but you actually don't have to put them. You only have to actually make the shape. But it's helpful to label them just so you know what they are. So 35 is my median. Now because the median technically falls between these two 35s, that means that I can use the top 35 for the upper half and this other 35 for the lower half. If my median was in my list, I would not count it when I go to do my quartiles. Now the quartiles are basically the median of the upper and lower half. So if I have my upper quartile, and these are the things that are kind of new this year. So my upper quartile is abbreviated UQ, and that is the median of the upper half. So if I were to take these 11 numbers and find their median, so then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, there's only 10 numbers. Excuse me. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I'm thinking it is this 60 because I have 5 numbers below it and 5 numbers above it, so it is the middle. So it's like the median of the higher numbers. That is my upper quartile, which is shown right here. So this is my upper quartile. Okay? So likewise, for the lower quartile, that is abbreviated LQ. That is the median of the lower half. So then if I take these numbers and find the median of the ones below my median, below the actual median, so then I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm thinking it's this first 15. Because then I have 5 numbers below it, 5 numbers above it, so that is my lower quartile. This is my upper quartile. And the 15 is shown right here, so this is my lower quartile. Okay. Okay. Okay, so now let's take a look at the other 2 points on this box and whisker, and that is my lower extreme and my upper extreme. So they sometimes are called your minimum or your maximum, or like I said, they could be called the lower extreme, or the upper extreme. And those are simply your highest and lowest numbers. But then there's also something else we want to talk about. So let me finish writing here. So basically these 5 numbers, your median, your lower quartile, upper quartile, and your lower extreme and your upper extreme, those are the 5 dots, if you will, on your box and whisker plot. So those are the 5 key numbers that you need to create the box and whisker plot. Now there's some other things you want to know. So the first one is called the interquartile range. Interquartile. So let's just kind of take these words apart to help you understand what this means. So inter in Latin means between, and quartile, of course, is your quarters, your quartiles. And if you think about how you find the range, you always subtract. So the interquartile range is your upper quartile minus your lower quartile, which visually gives you the length of your box. So that would, in this case, would be 60 minus 15, and that is 45. Now, what's important about the interquartile range is it also tells you where the middle 50% of the data is, which in business would be your ideal situation, because that's where box and whisker plots are used, in quality control and in business. So in business, you would want your results to be in this middle cluster, if you will, which is your interquartile range. That's why that is so important. Now, I mentioned 50%, so let's talk about this. So each section, there are 4 sections to your box and whisker. There's the lower whisker, there's the lower half of the box, upper half of the box, and the upper whisker. They divide your data, if you think about it, they divide your data into 4 sections. This is your lower whisker, this is your lower box, this is your upper box, and this is your upper whisker. So that means each section of the box and whisker plot contains 25% of the data, each of them. And I mentioned earlier how you have to be careful not to assume that because one section is longer, that doesn't mean there's more numbers. It just means they're more spread apart. That's why one section will be longer than another. So some common questions you might be asked on how to interpret box and whisker plots are things like, how many students did greater than 35 texts in a week, or what percentage of students, rather. So the percentage of students that sent greater than 35 texts would be 50%, because 35 is your median, and half of the box and whisker plot and half of the data is above 35. Or you might get one like, say, how many students had greater than 60 texts? And in that case, it would be 25%, because it's just the upper half of the upper whisker, and so that's only a quarter of the box plot, and so that is 25%. Now, another thing I want to mention here before I leave is the fact that sometimes the quartiles get named a little differently depending on what calculator you're using, or sometimes on different tests they use different notations. So let me just address this quickly before we close out this video. So this is the 8 in this case is our lower extreme, where I mentioned that sometimes that's called the minimum. The 15 is our low. Sometimes this is called Q sub 1. or first quartile, which is basically saying it's that far, it's a quarter of the way in from the data. And then we have our median, which of course is probably the most important one. Sometimes that is called Q2 because it is 2/4 of the way up into your box and whisker plot. And then we have our upper quartile, which is sometimes called Q3, kind of like third quartile because it's 3/4 of the way in from the box and whisker plot. And then our upper extreme may be called Q4. I actually don't like these Q numbers. I prefer the names, but I just wanted to let you know that sometimes you will see these, and so don't be alarmed when you do. Oh, one more thing. That upper extreme is sometimes called the max, or the max. So I hope this helped you with being able to read a box and whisker plot. And as far as making one, you just take your data, separate it in half, get your median, separate it in half again, get your quarters, and then just make sure you have your number line good to go. I will probably make another video. I will make another video on that in the near future. Thank you for listening and have a good day.